the Chromebook in the app mode, trying to say it correctly, to graph things. And you can use the Chromebook for pretty much anything. The only day you're not going to be able to use the Chromebook is the first day. So again, we're going to start our exam on Tuesday. And the part that we take on Tuesday is going to be non-calculator. And it's just going to be a small snippet of what's on the test. Do you remember when we did stuff with eyes, with the imaginary numbers? That's the majority of what it is. It's like having something like...
Why don't we learn about the imaginary numbers in this? Because that was module 3.
I know. Because, I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. I didn't write the book. We try to go in the best order possible, and sometimes it's almost like what came first, the chicken or the egg, and it's kind of a hard time of like... Yeah.
I mean, sometimes the things you learn later are easier when you learn them, if you would have learned them.
True. So like these, where we were multiplying, right? Or dividing, or adding and subtracting, right? And we treated I like a variable, unless it was I squared and then it was -1. So those types of problems, and there were maybe a couple others that end up on day 1, and we'll get to that as well. All right, let's see. I want to find the graph for x squared minus 6x plus 5. Remember, to get the squared, or to get any power, you have to hit Shift 6, because that'll give you your caret key. All right, so I see a minimum. I spy with my, oh no, it disappeared. Where'd you go, little minimum? Okay, so 3, -4 is my minimum, and kind of like this table told me, I don't see a maximum. Agreed. No max. So sometimes they'll have a max, sometimes they won't. So remember, for the multiple choice on this one, it might say, like one of your choices would have to be, minimum would be 3, -4, and then maximum would be none. So, yeah, that's what you'd be looking for in the multiple choice department. So we did have a min, it was 3, -4. We used our Chromebooks to help us with that. We used Desmos. A note that you could write yourself on your note card is, hey self, if you ever get a min-max problem, type it into Desmos. So that could be a nice little note to write yourself, because like, we'll remember for today that that's what we did, but will you remember on Friday next week that that's how we did this? And if the answer is yes, awesome. If the answer is no, then you would need to write yourself a note. So any min-max problems, we find the min and the max using Desmos. We plug in our equation. Okay. We want to find the average rate of change from 2 to 5. So here's what that means. We want to plug in 2, and we want to plug in 5, and then we're going to find the rate of change. Do you remember what the rate of change formula is? Yes. Yeah, so anytime you see rate of change, that's your formula. It's the y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And you can put it as change in y over change in x. You can write it however you like. But you need to make sure that you have, you know the formula. Maybe it's on your note card if it's something you don't know. All right, I'm going to plug in 2 first. I'm going to do it in my head, but remember, you could also do it on a calculator. 2 squared is 4. 4 times 3 is 12. And then if I plug into here, this will be 10. So I get 22. So the first thing I want to do is find the y coordinate, because I need that for this formula, right? I need those y's. Now I'm going to plug in the 5. And honestly, that's more math than what I want to do in my head right now, so I'm going to type it in. So if you want to type it in, remember you type it in with a parenthesis house around where you're inserting the number. So I'm inserting 5, so I'm going to put a parenthesis house around 5, square it, plus 5, and then I'm going to insert 5 again. So again, anytime I insert something, I always use a parenthesis house. And I get 100. So I'm glad I did it on the calculator. Those were bigger numbers. Okay. I'm going to call one of the points x1, y1. I'm going to call the other one x2, y2. It doesn't matter which you call which, but remember the subscripts need to stay consistent. So they both need to be 2s or 1s. But again, you could have them flipped. Like this could be x2, y2, and this could be x1, y1. But again, the subscripts need to stay the same within the parentheses. All right, so let's subtract y2 minus y1. So let's see, that would give me 80, 78. So when I subtract, I'll get 78. And then in the bottom, x2 minus x1 is going to give me 3. And that's got to be nice, right? Yes, 26. Huh? Did you calculate the points correctly, the y values?
Probably not, because I got 55.
I can double check my other one. I think I'm okay, but 3.
I got 100.
You got 100? Did you get 22 for this one?
Yeah.
Okay. So make sure when you plug it in parentheses. And it's just a friendly reminder to be careful on the calculators, right? And maybe it's also a good reminder that if you're nervous about your answer, like if it doesn't look quite right, then maybe you type it in again. All right. Solving. So somebody said, how do we solve these? What's our plan? You can solve them any way you want to, because I'm not even going to know because I'm not going to check, right? So let's talk about some different ways that you could solve. I would always try to factor and solve first because I think that's the faster, easier way. So I usually try that first. And then I switch to quadratic formula. Or do you have a Chromebook at your disposal? Yes. Could you even graph it on the Chromebook and find where it hits the y-axis? Yes. So there's all sorts of options. Let's look at this one. This one's going to factor. So let's do this one by factoring. So I'll even write down my method so you remember what we did. So this one I'm doing as a factor. All right, so it's a trinomial. X times x is x squared. What are my magic numbers that multiply to positive 12 but add to negative 7? Yes. Okay. Now, we're going to use the zero product property. If we have two things being multiplied together that equal 0, one or the other must have been 0. What would make this parenthesis 0? If x were 4, what would make this 0 if x were 3? So be careful as you're picking solutions, because the solution you need to pick is going to have both of those. So if choice A is 4, and choice B is 3, and choice C is 4 and 3, you need to pick C, right? We need the 4 and the 3. All right, next one. This one's kind of ugly, isn't it? Okay. It doesn't have a middle term, so actually I'm going to do something for this one. I'm just going to solve it by isolating x. So I'm going to subtract the 13 over. So this cancels. I get 2x squared equals negative 13. How would I get the x alone? Yeah, let's divide by 2. So now I've got these cancel. X squared equals negative 13 divided by 2. How do I undo the square? Square root. So I'm going to square root each side. Remember that when you square root, you get a plus or minus symbol that pops up. Okay. Back in the day, we were like, ooh, we can't do this. There's no solution. Now when we square root a negative number, we know what letter comes into play. I. So I have, in the numerator, I have I, and then root positive 13. Okay, that's a square root. It doesn't look like one. All over the square root of 2. So remember, when you're square rooting the whole thing, you're square rooting each part. This is kind of tiny. Can we read that? Okay, so it says plus minus I root 13 over root 2. It almost looks like I dotted my I with a heart. didn't, but let's pretend. Okay, we have to rationalize the denominator. Do you remember we're not allowed to leave roots in the denominator? Remember that whole deal? So I'm going to multiply the denominator by root 2. Here's why. If I multiply it by itself, root 2 times root 2 is root 4. What's the square root of 4? 2. So this is just going to become 2. So multiplying by that root actually helps me. If I multiply it to the denominator, I also have to multiply it to the numerator. So in the numerator, I still have my plus minus. I still have my I. But instead of root 13, I multiplied it by 2. Now I have root 26. And if I could simplify this more, I would. So if it had been 24, I could simplify it. But there's nothing that divides into 26. That's a perfect square. So this would be my final answer. So this one, my method was that I isolated the variable. The only time that I do that is when I have my x squared and a number. Do you see how there's no middle term? That's when I isolate the variable. So again, you could write yourself that note. Hey, self, you might want to isolate the variable as your method when there's no middle term. All right. Let's look at number 5 now. I'm going to do 5 even a different way than I've done the other ones. It's getting crazy. I'm going to factor the left side. Do you see how it's not set equal to 0? I'm just going to deal with that for a minute. I'm going to let it be. I don't love it, but I'm going to let it be. How can I factor the left side? X plus 7 and? Yeah. So is it really x plus 7, that set of parentheses squared, equals 100? Yeah? Okay. We want to isolate the variable now. How can I get rid of the square? Square root. So if I square root, I get x plus 7 equals plus minus 10. So don't forget about your plus minus because you'll lose out on a solution if you don't have it. And then how can I finish solving it? Yeah, subtract the 7. So I have x equals negative 7 plus minus 10. So let's figure out what our two solutions are. So we can have negative 7 plus 10 as a solution, and then we can also have negative 7 minus 10 as a solution. So this would give me 3, this would give me negative 17. And those would be my two solutions. So this was another one where I would say to factor. Let me also show you how you could do that one on the Chromebook. I'm going to double up on this one. If I want to do it on the Chromebook, do you see how we talked about this, that it wasn't equal to 0, right? Okay, so I would first subtract over the 100. So if I wanted to do it on the Chromebook, so let's say we wanted to go Chromebook, I would subtract over the 100. I would get x squared plus 14 minus 51 equals 0. Do you agree that this would be set equal to 0? Okay. 14x. Sorry, we need that x in there. All right, so x squared minus 14x minus 51. Okay, so do you see how, was it positive? Oh, I typed it in wrong. Thank you. I got minus happy. I'm sorry. Yes, thank you. Okay, so you type it in exactly as you see it. And so here's my equation. And then do you see how I can see one of my solutions here at 3? Is that one of the solutions I got? Okay. And then do you see how I can't see the other one? Okay. I know there's a second one hiding because it's a parabola, so you can back out. You can zoom out a little bit. And then if you hover over it, there's my other solution. So could you type in every quadratic equation and find the solutions that way? Yeah, you could. Now, it's not going to give you square roots, though. So So you would have to use a calculator to kind of convert. So if it gave you something like 0.707 and you're like, I don't know what that is, you'd have to type it into your calculator and see if it matched a square root. Does that make sense? So you'd have to double check decimals. That'd be the only downside, I guess, of that method. Okay?
If there's a decimal in the equation.
If there's a decimal in the answer. So let's pretend I had gone to my answer and it was like negative 17.35612, whatever. I'd have to figure out which one it matches up with. So I'd look at my answer choices. And let's say my answer was 3 root 2. I'd have to like go through and figure out which one matched to the decimal. Because they aren't going to correspond exactly. So you'd have to kind of, I almost would call it converting. You're converting it from like a nice exact answer to decimal equivalent is what you're doing. Okay, let's solve the next one using the quadratic formula. So the quadratic formula will always work, and that's what your homework is on tonight. So A equals 1, B equals 3, C equals 10. All right, quadratic formula is opposite of B plus minus square root B squared minus 4AC all over 2A. And then I start plugging things in. Move that up just a little. Okay. Ooh, let me write a note here. I found it. Sorry. Okay. Opposite of 3 plus minus square root 3 squared is 9 minus 4 times A times C all over 2 times A. And then I use my calculator. So this is going to give me, let's see, I don't even know if I need my calculator for this one. 2. So this is 9 minus 40, and 9 minus 40 is negative 31. All right, now I can do something with that because it's going to give me an imaginary, but is there any way to simplify the 31 under the square root? No. So negative 3 plus minus I root 31 over 2. So the quadratic formula will always work. So if you want one method for solving, if you're like, I don't like this jumping around business that you did, I want to pick one method and stick with it, I get that. Like, I like consistency too. You can use the quadratic formula every single time because stuff doesn't always factor, but it can always go into the quadratic formula. So write yourself a note, write future you a note of how you want to do these problems. That's what I would do on my note card. So on my note card, I would tell myself, because there's going to be a bunch of them, I would tell myself, hey self, when you start solving quadratic equations, you like the quadratic formula, or you want to type it into decimals. Like, tell yourself, your future self, what way you liked the best, if you want to pick one way and stay consistent. Now, I'm going to throw you off and give you one other option. Ready? Remember, they're multiple choice, yeah? So could I look at my choices, plug them back in, and see which one works? So that's another option. So you have lots of options. So it's good and bad. It's always nice to have options, but you need to kind of make a decision. And that's not something I'm always good at, but you need to condense it down and make a decision. Like, what do I want to use? Do I want to jump around and use whatever's easiest? Do I want to stick with a quadratic formula? Do I want to graph everything? What do I want to do? So again, I would write your future self a note. Like, hey, future self, always use the quadratic formula. Or always plug in the answers because you're not the best at solving these, right? So you kind of know yourself. Write yourself a note. All right, last problem is going to take us 10 seconds. These are easy. You take your B value, you divide it by 2, and you square it. So it's always B divided by 2 squared. This is the formula. So for this problem in particular, this is what we get. What's negative 14 divided by 2? Negative 7. And if I square negative 7, I get 49. So 49 is the number that if I had it as a part of that problem, it would factor into a perfect square. And look up here. Did we have that number? And it factored into a perfect square? See? Huh?
Yeah, we already have that version.
Yeah,
14 is
basically, yeah,
negative,
just a
so-
different, yeah. All right, axis of symmetry. Let's talk about how to find that. So the axis of symmetry is always x equals. And it's going to be negative b divided by 2a. So the axis of symmetry, this is the formula. Negative b divided by 2a. Remember, you have to have the x equals because it's a vertical line. So the axis of symmetry is the line that comes straight down through your graph and splits it in two. And it should come right straight down through the vertex. Okay. Last thing that's on here, which values have zeros between them? All right, so you got to play detective sometimes. So one of the questions on the test is going to look like this. Hold on. I got to invent some numbers. Give me a second. And then I'll talk to you again. No, I don't want that. Okay. Let's pretend this is our table. So write this table down. Pretend this is your table of values. You're going to have a question. Oh, my. Okay, I did not ask you to zoom in that far, I don't think. Okay. There we go. Okay. Felt like I was at the eye doctor for a minute while it was adjusting. Which is better, 1 or 2? 2 or 3?
For me, I felt the part where they had to read the letters. They had to make it bigger before I could read it.
See, and I passed, and I'm like, are you sure? Because when I hold my phone, like I used to be able to hold my phone like you guys do, like at a normal distance. And now I hold my phone like this. And so I feel like, are you sure that I'm 20/20? Because I don't know that I really believe you.
I got my glasses because I was like, oh, yeah, this makes sense.
Yeah, this is way better.
Yeah, I was like,
I know.
What have I been missing?
Okay, do you see how it says which values on the table have zeros in between them? Okay, I will show you. There are two spots. Do you see how between 4 and 5, I went from a -3 to a +5? Would I have had to hit 0 in the process? Yes. So if somebody says, which values does the 0 live in between? There's one between 4 and 5 because it had to hit 0. What are two other numbers that there has to be a 0 that lives in between? Okay. So there is a problem like this also on the exam. So it's going to say zeros live in between which numbers, and you're going to have to pick it out based on the table. Yeah.
So do we have to put the x values or can we put the y values?
Remember, it's an exam question, so it's going to have the answers, and you're going to pick.
Oh, that's right.
So
okay.
this will be on there, and it'll say between one of the choices will be x values between 2 and 3, x values between 4 and 5. Oh,
Okay.
yep, that's good.
Okay, I see.
So,
what you're
yeah,
saying.
yep, it'll be a multiple choice. So that's one of the benefits is you don't have to worry about formatting. So there are positives, there are pros and cons to the multiple choice. One pro is that you don't have to worry about the formatting because it's already there and you're going to pick the right one. Okay, take out homework next. I'm going to stop that.